Ben, let's talk about the politics of this for Anthony Albanese. He said on Wednesday morning that some of these people would have the full force of the law applied to them. I found that interesting because up until now, we've been talking about these people as essentially victims, people who were taken to the war zone as children or at least as young women who went there maybe of their own volition, who were married to people who fought for a caliphate, probably not good guys, I think we could safely say. Now he seems to be framing them as potential perpetrators or people who've done something wrong. What's your sense of what the government actually thinks about these people?
The government is being very careful about the politics of this. I think it's useful to take a step back and look at the fact that both the Morrison government and the Albanese government have returned some of these ISIS brides and some of the children back to Australia. In fact, the Morrison government repatriated some orphans. Early in the Albanese government, they repatriated some women and children. There was another group that came back last year. There's some 34 trying to leave now. So the government's position is that it does not support the repatriations. But of course, these women and their children are Australian citizens, and like any other citizen, they have a right to come home. We do know that the women have been issued passports. So is that assistance? Well, I mean, I think it is, but it's only the sort of assistance that any other Australian would expect. The Prime Minister says, we'll, subject these people to the full force of the law. So, what does that mean? Going to a place controlled by terrorists is an offence. And being a member of a terrorist organisation is an offence. So arguably, that could apply to some of them if they sort of knowingly went there. But there has only been one of these ISIS brides charged over going to a place controlled by a terrorist organisation, and she got off. She was not convicted. So there's not a whole lot of precedent there to suggest that any of these women would be convicted. However, they will have to be properly assessed by the security agencies. It's likely that some or all of them will be, closely watched for a long time.
How much is this a sort of symbolic response, Ben? And I'm interested in how it's shaped by the debate that we're having right now in Australian politics about immigration. So last year, when The Australian reported that a cohort of ISIS families were going to come home, initially the federal government completely denied it, said that the story was wrong, and then they were embarrassed when a senior New South Wales police officer got up in front of a parliamentary committee and said, yes, we're preparing for them to come back. I mean, implying very heavily that preparations were well underway. Of course, since then, Australia's been plunged into a very hot conversation about immigration. Do you think that's altering the way the government is talking about this at all?
Absolutely. I mean, immigration is one of the hot button issues out there in the community. Voters are heading over to One Nation because they like what that party's saying about immigration. So that is definitely the domestic context that is sort of playing into the government's response. Now, while the PM is sounding quite hairy-chested on this, there's actually, probably a lot more sympathy within the government for the position of these women than they're actually publicly letting on. And we've reported in the past that there have been sort of some private conversations between senior members of the government and Save the Children, which has been a key advocate for these women and children over the years in calling for them to come home. There's a prominent Sydney doctor, Jamal Rifi, who is coordinating some of the efforts over in Syria on behalf of the women. He is actually quite a close friend of the Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke. So, it stretches credulity that the government, it doesn't know what's sort of going on here and is not offering at least some basic level of support.
Advocates for the family have been saying for years now, Ben, that if the government doesn't assist these families to come home, that there will be attempts to get them home by other means. Presumably that means they might try to engage a people smuggler. We have seen other people do that from camps in the Middle East, not necessarily coming to Australia. I mean, that's not an outcome the government wants, though, is it?
No, and I mean I think the ideal situation would be a managed return of these women, so that no one's surprised and everyone. All the security agencies can have the appropriate conversations. I mean, I think really that's what is going to happen when these women do get out and do make their way to an Australian embassy somewhere. Those conversations will be able to happen, and it's just for political reasons. At the moment, the government can't be seen to be repatriating them or offering too much help. But they're Australian citizens like you or I. Unless they are slapped with a temporary exclusion order, they're coming back.
There is an advocacy job the government could be doing here, isn't there? I mean, Anthony Albanese is a pretty good political communicator. He could stand up and say, look, these are all the reasons why we have decided we can't leave these people to rot. We can't have the Kurds in northern Syria looking after them forever. It's not fair on them. We have an obligation here. Why do you think he's not doing that?
Well, that would be a very sort of sophisticated argument on a subject that, there's not a lot of, sympathy and kind of willingness to kind of accept the nuance there. So, look, everything you say is true in terms of those women, but and a lot of them, were taken there against their wishes. The children are completely innocent, particularly the ones that were born over there. And a lot of people in the countering extremism world believe that they should be brought home in an orderly way to be properly managed. But that's a very difficult conversation to have when you have new opposition leader Angus Taylor, who's going out hard on this. You have the Hanson forces and others who would campaign on it, and it's a quite a difficult and nuanced conversation that the government would have to have with Australians, and look, it's not up for that at all, given the political circumstances.
Do you detect from the government, Ben, any sense that the conversation that we're having now in Australia about anti-Semitism and big protests on city streets is feeding into this, that they're becoming extra cautious because of all of that?
Look, I think that's the case. We're all, universally Australians, were alarmed and shocked about what we saw at Bondi Beach in December, that terrible attack, and that plays out in the wider political debate, and so there are great concerns about Islamist extremism and national security. It's unarguable that these women have spent a lot of time, with ISIS, and they certainly need to be closely assessed before they're allowed back into the community.
Ben Packham is the Australian's Foreign Affairs and Defence correspondent. Thanks, Ben.